When you're behind a computer screen late at night, no one knows who you are, where you are. I became part of this cyber community where people are exploring deviant thoughts and exploring their fetishes. I'm not the only one out there with these thoughts. They were accepted. The anonymity makes you try and outdo the other person. Who could be the sicker one? Who could be the more depraved one? The baby was sleeping, the mom was sleeping, there was just nothing to do. And then you shut the computer off and that's it. I go back to being the regular me. But someone might say the anonymous nature could also bring out who you really are. In my worst nightmare, I could never guess that this would have happened.
Breaking news, an almost unbelievable story. A New York City police officer has been arrested in a failed plot to kidnap dozens of women, cook them, and then eat them.
Gilberto Valle has become known as the Cannibal Cop. The 28-year-old's wife uncovered the alleged plot.
Charged in a conspiracy to commit kidnapping and allegedly used NYPD computers to get information on a list of victims.
Defense lawyers did not deny his online activity, but called it a sexual fantasy that he would never act on.
These are thoughts, very ugly thoughts, but we don't prosecute people for their thoughts.
It comes down to this. Is this guy just fantasizing, or is there enough evidence to suggest he was really planning to do this?
There's nothing we like better than, at least in fiction, a killer. You know, the worst, meanest, baddest, roughest, toughest serial killer in the world. Let's get inside their heart and mind and figure out exactly what they're about. And there are story archetypes that we all sort of adhere to. Gil, as the cannibal cop, was typed as well. Whether it was the monster of the week, or as this week's Hannibal Lecter, or as a master criminal, or as a vicious beast who needed to be controlled. Not only was this someone who seemed to have been planning to abduct and eat his wife and other women, but the idea of him wandering around with a badge was something so devious that it was unbelievable. But then when it actually made it to trial, there were two sides to this story. And when the defense stood up and said, this is a thought police case, then suddenly it got even more theatrical and more interesting. It was the best that true crime has to offer, because it was about a crazy side of human behavior that we don't get to see. And that's what was happening in real life here.
Audio's good?
Just give me a check 1, check 2.
Check 1, check 2.
Ready to go?
Mm-hmm. There were a lot of myths about what was going on here. You get a picture painted in your head, you get a story, and you just start, once you have that initial concept, once that you have that preconceived notion, you start to seek out pieces of information that go with that jive with it, and you disregard things that go against that. You know, I want everyone to have all the facts in front of them before they make up their minds for themselves. I grew up in Queens, New York. My parents separated at an early age. Mom was more soft love. You know, she was there for emotional support. Dad would be the one to kick you in the butt. He was very, you know, strict, and we didn't want to disappoint my dad.
Valle's arrest comes after the FBI obtained detailed accounts of the barbaric plans. The government says Valle made his sick plans in online chat rooms. His father in disbelief.
Of course, I'm shocked. Is it possible? I don't think so.
As a parent, now that all this has happened, a lot of different things come into the mind. Is he crazy? You know, all this stuff coming together. What is he? Is he crazy?
How did you feel when you heard the first allegations about cannibalism and kidnapping?
I couldn't believe it. I said, that's not my son. I'm like, there's got to be a mistake. That's not my son.
Gilito, mama kiss. Gilito kiss. Gilito kiss.
The first time that I actually heard these internet chats, that's when I noticed, I'm like, okay, my son did have a problem. For the good boy that I know to be discussing women in such a way, it was just horrible. But if anything, he needed help. See a psychiatrist, see a therapist. I mean, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, but, you know, some people choose to let out their frustrations by going to the gym, punching a punching bag. That might work for them. For some, it might be getting on a site like this and fantasizing, you know, thoughts of horrible thoughts like that.
Well, he created a monster. He's a good writer. I mean, how can anybody believe that one person is going to kidnap 100 women and cook and eat 100 women? Which one was in the trunk of his car? Which one was in the spit over the fire? Which one was in the oven?
The fact that he's sitting there in his apartment while his wife and baby are asleep in the next room, and he's talking about, you know, slitting her throat. And the fact that he's going around in his police uniform all contribute to a sense of dread around it. But was he involved in the planning of a real crime, and at what point is it appropriate to step in?
There was no real-world attempt. But when they went through his computer, they found 24 sets of conversations. And 21 of them, people said, hey, is this for real? And Gil Valle said, no, this is a fantasy. No matter what I say, it's all make-believe. But in 3, he never said that. In fact, there were some moments in those chats where one of the participants would say, hey, are you for real? And Gil Valley would say, yes, he was. That could seem like evidence that this was a real conspiracy.
We do not have thought crime in this country. We do not prosecute people for what they think. It is permissible to have all of the thoughts from a criminal law enforcement point of view that Gilberto Valle had. What's impermissible is planning with another person to execute on those thoughts. 2 charges had been brought against him: conspiracy to kidnap, as well as an unauthorized use of a law enforcement database in order to gain some information about one of the victims.
Conspiracy is the prosecutor's favorite instrument. In order to be convicted of an attempt, you have to not only intend to do it, but you have to go beyond preparation and cross a line that suggests that you're going to do it unless something stops you. Conspiracy allows you to move that line back. If 2 people just talk about doing something terrible and agree to do it, and then take one overt act, they can be prosecuted and put in jail for the rest of their lives.
The overt act doesn't have to be a crime itself. You know, it's not like you say, let's go rob a bank, and the overt act then is you steal a car to be the getaway car. It could be something that is entirely lawful otherwise, it just might have special meaning here.
The defendant talked about disabling his victims using chloroform. He then searched how to make chloroform. The defendants talked about stalking their victims, and in fact, there was a search of a proprietary law enforcement-only database as to where one of the victims lived.
This is not a simple case of where you're going after somebody just who thought some evil thoughts. He took lots of steps in the direction of possibly doing terrible things.
He traveled to Maryland to visit one of the alleged intended victims. This target of his supposed plot was his college friend. If you think this is a dangerous, dangerous man, then everything that he did in real life takes on this really ominous color to it. This trip to Maryland with his wife and baby could seem like a recon mission for a murderous kidnapping plot.
If he, in fact, was planning to kill somebody specifically, then all of these would be overt acts within any meaning of the law. The question is, what was in his mind? And I'm not sure he knew.
Opening statements today in the trial of the Cannibal Cop.
In the words of both the prosecution and defense attorneys, this is going to be a bizarre trial.
I don't get to draw nudes very often. I usually see people sitting in a chair, looking straight ahead at a judge. But I got to do people on spits, women being cooked and roasted, and visuals of dark fetish net. If you pull in, you could see little naked bodies. It's pretty amazing. I've never really seen anything like that in a trial.
There were reporters there from all over the country. We'd heard a lot about this case, but now all of it was being laid out in front of us for the first time. There were 3 alleged co-conspirators: Michael Van Hise, somebody in Pakistan known as Ali Khan, and a man in England known as Moody Blues. He had these plans written out for how to kidnap women. He was planning on building a pulley apparatus in his basement to string women up and torture them and slow roast them. Says he had a giant oven that he planned on stuffing these women into. It all sounded crazy, but potentially true.
We had a tome of the chats copied for us, and we were in the position to determine how much of it was real and how much of it was fantasy. I think we all agreed this man has a problem. This is sick. This is really quite sick. But we weren't there to convict on his sick mind. We were there to convict on a conspiracy to kidnap and kill and maim and rape. What made it very real was that he took pictures from real people in his life and shared them on these sites. And that, for me, takes it past fantasy. He had what was called a blueprint and had made a list of what he needed. He had the ability to retrieve all these materials. That made it very real to us that any one of these women could have been a true victim of his.
Alicia Friska early on became a major figure in the case. Investigators said Gil had been stalking her.
When Gil starts talking money with Michael Van Hise, that shift in tone is chilling. He's suddenly very, grisly and mechanical, and let's talk turkey. Here's how we're going to get it done. And that feels like things are starting to get more real.
These fantasies were really, really scary. And the level of detail that Gil talked about and that other people talked about on the internet was also really, really scary. The reality, of course, coming back to reality, is that none of the things that they said ever came to pass. They often missed dates. They said, okay, I'll call you on Tuesday and we'll do something then, and then nothing happens on Tuesday. Nothing happens for 3 Tuesdays. And then nothing ever happens at all. These are fantasies.
There was no giant oven that could fit somebody inside of it. There was no pulley apparatus being set up in the basement. In fact, the basement was a laundry room for everyone in his Queens apartment building to use, and wouldn't be a very good torture chamber.
Let's put it this way. If this was done on Craigslist, you would know you were being scammed. He didn't have any of the things you would need, according to his own blueprints and plans on how to do this. He made up false information that wouldn't be effective.
You read about the case, you read about these chats, and you're horrified. You're turned off, you want to step away, and you're just like, this guy's a monster, like, whatever. Yeah, this is depraved language and unconventional thoughts, but there's no evidence.
Shock in the courtroom, guilty of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, also guilty of wrongfully accessing a federal database.
I almost froze in time, and all I kept hearing was guilty, guilty, guilty. For me to see him in shackles, it's heartbreaking. But through all this, I haven't cried until now. And I feel like I want to scream. I never let it out. He's not a cannibal. He never ate anyone. Isn't that the true definition of a cannibal, is someone that eats human meat?
How are you doing, out of all due respect? How are you doing?
Look at me. I'm strong.
I went back to the prison, and that's when I broke down. I didn't want to do it in front of my family, but I broke down. I hear a couple officers talking outside. One of them comes in and says, Valley got convicted. And another one says, get the fuck out. That guy thought that guy was going home.
Obviously, the case involved thoughts that were unusual and bizarre and frankly, very ugly. And we think that the jury just couldn't get past that.
The conviction was devastating to everyone on the defense team. You're representing a human being whose liberty is on the line, and when you lose, you lost it for this human being. I just think the jury didn't want to have the what if moment. Sure, he didn't act in the real world. Sure, this was all in cyberspace, but what if?
We were always worried that that thought would prevail over an objective, rational, non-emotional view of the evidence. People can be prosecuted for their thoughts and convicted, which is even sadder to think about.
This call is from a federal prison.
At this point, I'm pretty depressed every day. Everyone thinks I'm facing sentencing. You know, technically I'm not yet. I'm still waiting to hear from the judge. They keep saying a couple weeks more, and it gets pushed back, and it gets pushed back again and again and again. Julia emailed me, and she said she doesn't think it's going to be good.
The Cannibal Cop case really raises the big question. What is the line between thought and action, right? Between fantasy and crime. And it's so gray. In a case where there's no victim, there's no harm, was there enough evidence to show there had been an overt act?
The government was saying that all of his Google searches were overt acts in furtherance of a conspiracy. Gil, at some point, is thinking about eating people, and he starts typing, how do you abduct a girl? He starts doing research into chloroform and baking pans and knives for cutting people up. But the idea that a Google search would constitute an overt act, I think, is dangerous. That's where you get into thought crime.
When we think about thought crime, you think about, George Orwell in 1984. You think about the thought police. You think about being put away simply because of something that's in your head. A thought crime in the modern age, in the post-George Orwell age, becomes more of a question of technology and its power to see what's on our minds much more often than it used to be able to.
It's possible for the internet to know more about you than your best friend does, than your family members do, because what you type in the Google search box is often a very, very private thing, things you wouldn't even tell your friends and family.
His wife is typing in things like, my husband doesn't love me. It's very sad to see, but I think it shows that Google searching is just an extension of the thoughts we have in our heads. Sometimes we're sitting at our computer alone and we just type them in.
A lot of the searches that Gil was doing are as open to interpretation as those chats are. And one of the cases made by the defense was that this was storytelling, that the Dark Fetish Network was some sort of communitarian storytelling exercise. The same way that the prosecution is arguing that the chats are a window into Gil's thoughts, we can also look at literature as a window into the author's thoughts. Someone like Stephen King can write, any number of disturbing things about human behavior, and nobody's putting him in jail.
Why is it that we're fascinated by stories about violence? If you read, if you view movies, our